Welcome to the Acts 29 podcast. Acts 29 is an organization and global network of churches that exist to plant churches worldwide. Now here's your host, Vice President of Acts 29 Church Planting, Dr. Adam Flint.
All right, well, welcome back to the Acts 29 podcast, and I've got a good friend with me today, Pastor Aaron, and we're here at City Life Church in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, with snow on the ground.
Snow. First time since
snow
2018.
apocalypse. I know. Right?
Nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
A zoo.
All right, first of all, Aaron, settle once and for all, how do you pronounce your last name?
Nebrija.
And
it's Filipino.
Okay.
Clearly you can see in the complexion, the hair color. I was adopted, so
nice.
I got a Filipino dad and a
not Nebrija,
no,
you've heard everything under the.
I've heard it all.
Yep, you've heard it all.
Yep.
Right on. All right, tell us a little bit about family, Caroline, kids, church, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Caroline's awesome, and she keeps it all together in a massive way. And meaning me, I'm the biggest tyrant in our home probably. Our daughter Shiloh's 12, and she's killing it, and just the sweetest thing. We're so proud of her. Maverick's 10, or I'm sorry, Maverick is 6, and he's wild.
Reading like a 10-year-old, though.
Reading like an adult, and that's the wild thing we're trying to figure out what to do with. Is he's like, I just read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and we're like, oh, the kids one. He's like, no, yours, Daddy. I read yours. I was like, wow, okay, we got to figure out what to do with that. And then Wyatt, he's all over the place. He's 2, still in diapers, kind of gets away with what he wants and tests it all the time to the max.
Good third kid.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We have fun. We built a snowman for the first time in my kid's life 2 days ago. So that's what.
There's all these melting snowmen as we're driving down the road around here, and they're all about this big. You know, it's just hilarious.
Yep.
So, okay, give us a little history of planting this church.
Yeah, we moved here really kind of parachute plant. I don't strongly encourage that for anybody. Hindsight, from Nashville, Tennessee, in 2016, we assessed with Acts 29, and we've been with the network ever since and love it. We moved here to Mount Pleasant. Started with 6 families in our living room. We moved to a neighborhood clubhouse. It was really their yoga studio, and so
why Mount Pleasant? Like, what was the draw here?
A lot of that is just I had a mentor who said, when we were talking about planting, he said, find a city that you love, and when you do, make sure your wife loves it 10 times more than you do. Yeah. And his reasoning behind that was it's going to get hard, and when it does, our tendencies want to be to eject and go to a place that sort of is life-giving. But if the city that you are in, you love, and is life-giving, it will give you life. And it's one of the strongest things that I think I tell planters today who kind of ask our story. They say, hey, what's some of the biggest advice that you would give planters? And the number one thing is I say, don't do it. And number 2, find a city that you love. And when you do, make sure your wife loves it 10 times more than you do. So what was behind that in a lot of ways for us was we knew we wanted to stay in the South. That was just an area that we felt called to culturally. And then Charleston was a city that we loved. We would visit all the time. We'd come here for breaks. We'd come here to pray and rest.
It's a great place.
It's just such a great city. Yeah. And it's just a city we kind of fell in love with. Well, the irony is that we said, hey, let's go there to pray about where we're going to plant. And one of the things then beyond that was we were saying we wanted to be in an influential part of the city. And just for us, it's definitely arguable, but Mount Pleasant was that part. When we got here, we found out after the fact even that Mount Pleasant and Franklin, Tennessee, where we came from, the Chamber of Commerce were sister commerces. And so much of that was because the cities were so similar.
What was happening in the 2 cities.
And what we had so much peace about was we just felt like Mount Pleasant wouldn't be a huge cultural shift for us. Yeah. And it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and part of what's happened in Mount Pleasant is going to be what I want to talk about today. So you guys planted, and Mount Pleasant has just exploded. Yep. I mean, this area has taken off in the last few years, and where you guys are particularly is, I mean, just tons of new development out here. Yeah. And that brings what most people who are planting a church thinks is a huge blessing, like new people and all that kind of stuff, which it does. Yeah. But it brings some other big headaches in planting a church.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them is facility stuff for you guys. So talk about what that was like.
Yeah.
Like, what was it? You moved in here, you guys start to plant here, and then...
Just to give you some context, the dirt is $1 million an acre surrounding us.
Yep.
There's 40,000 people within a 3-mile radius of where we currently meet.
Yeah.
The neighborhood is just booming. They put a Costco in the middle of the neighborhood, not even on the highway, just to serve these people that are around where we.
And it didn't like it was existing. I mean, Mount Pleasant has existed for a while, but like it took off in terms of like suburban development. And
in 2016 when we moved here, USA Today reported as the 10th fastest growing town, small town ish, in America.
Yeah.
And it was just on fire. And it's capped. So the cost is going up because in Charleston it's a bit of a water world. We're landlocked on it in every direction in a lot of ways, a lot of islands. And so there's only so much growth. And so as it gets taken up, the price goes up. The other thing about Mount Pleasant is there's no industrial space. So there's no warehouses, there's no any of that to go and look in. And even an elementary school at a church plant status was looking at charging us $4,000 a month. And even that wasn't a long-term win for us. Like, you only get to say you're a church plant for so long, and then it's like, where are we?
Right.
So we knew even then, even if that were temporary, we had to find a home that was going to work, but cost was outrageous.
Sure. Yeah, which is, I mean, back to that. Okay, so it's booming. That looks on the surface like, at least culturally, contextually, maybe God's doing something here, and we can move in, and there aren't a lot of churches and all this. And then you get here, and you're like, it's not like an existing area of town that has old commercial space that's gone vacant that you could rent. It's dirt up building, $1 million an acre. That doesn't even count for, you were talking about impact fees and, you got architects and the waiting time. And I mean, it's years and years. And you're brand new.
We're a pretty raw plant. So we didn't have a huge network, a huge community here. We're meeting one person at a time, like at the playground or at the paint store. And inviting them to a cookout in my driveway, which totally felt like a cult.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question about facilities, we started meeting in my house.
Yep.
Kids overtook it. It's a small place. And then we found a neighborhood clubhouse in the neighborhood, our neighborhood clubhouse. It was charging us $200 a Sunday, and we could get about 35 people in there. And the kids were on the other side of the wall, so loud that we literally bought foam panels to put up against the door so that we couldn't hear the kids while we were trying to. Sounds terrible, but it was so disruptive. And then we filled that room up, and we said, hey. And that was sort of our core team planning phase, casting vision. What are our values? What are we going to be about? And at some point, we're going to take the lid off this and really let the community in. And we're not going to be able to do it in this yoga studio.
Yeah.
And so when you're a planter, you know everything that's for sale, everything that's for lease, and you just sort of obsess over it because, as you're saying, like that facilities piece is a massive piece. It's not just space to meet in, it's your environment. It will contain some of your ethos. It will, it's your house of worship. It should matter to us. And so there's certain things that might be available that we just go, that's not what we want. That's not who we are.
Right.
And so we,
well, hold on. So let me stop you right there because, well, there's two things. One is, the reason we're talking about this isn't just a random discussion of facility stuff, but, and it's not even pragmatic. It's what God has done. And when I talk to guys about planting churches and they start asking, what do we do about facilities? And like you said, maybe a school will give you a year. Maybe a school won't even let you in, or they're in a movie theater around to plant. Like, what do you do? And how do you have some kind of long-term presence in a community? I always go back to what you guys did. And so this story, I think, is really transferable. And it's not just to answer the question of a facility. It did that. Yeah. But what you guys have done has really been a missional move in this thing. And so that's why I wanted to talk about this, was because I think the longer we go on in church planting, the less Christian the country is, if you can even say that, but you know what I mean? Like, the harder and harder it is to find facilities. Right. And the more expensive it gets to find facilities, and the less sustainable it can be to do some of these, things we used to do in terms of church planting. And
when you think about the funding side of it, fundraising is a part. There's a cost to planting, And at the same time, what if we could alleviate a lot of that? And so what if your facility was your fundraiser in many ways? And that's what we initially ended up in.
Yep.
And then we discovered along the way, hey, there's a lot more going on here than we thought was.
Yeah.
And so just to kind of give you how that story played out, we rented our space. It was an old community center that ended up being the showroom for the builder that developed all the houses in the neighborhood. They built the houses, they moved out. A different guy bought it, didn't have a vision for it, came with sort of a larger plot of land that he bought. We walked into that scenario and said, hey, what's your vision for this space? He said, I don't have one. Do you? I said, absolutely. He said, great, it'll be $20,000 a month. Mind you, we haven't launched yet.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, there's no way in the world, like, there's not a world I live in where we're going to write a check.
Yeah, and what
for this
scenario
guy for
does that?
$20,000 a month?
Sure.
Maybe ever.
Right. And it wasn't like 50,000 square feet either.
No.
I mean, we're talking
13,000 feet.
Expensive real estate.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
And so I said, oh, hey, you willing to get creative? He said, yeah. And so 3 weeks later, we made him an offer, and I offered him $3,000 a month. And he laughed, and I said, listen, man, it's probably what we could pay the school, and we're going to acknowledge this is better, but it's all we got. And we need the main space to gather in on Sundays. We'll do setup, tear down. Doesn't need to be ours. And if we can have on-site storage, an office, and one room for kids, we'll call it a win.
So the discussion wasn't to have it 24/7. It was just kind of let us treat it like a setup, tear down, temporary facility.
I said, let's start with a year. He said, we'll start with 6 months. I'm not so sure you're going to make it, and I'm not so sure you think you're going to make it. And I was like,
wow.
Deal, 6 months, we'll take it. So we paid 6 months. We were set up, tear down. He never booked an event. We never tore down once. There's all these other offices he was trying to lease out. There was one company selling rugs like illegally out of one of the rooms in the office building that we shared the space with. They weren't there on Sundays. We really did whatever we wanted. The 6 months went by, and we just kept sending checks. Didn't hear from him. We were like, don't ask.
Yeah, don't say it. Just let it go. Keep.
If he's getting his money, maybe he won't say anything.
Yep.
He comes to me about a year in, and he says, hey, Aaron, we've been trying to sublease the space to tenants, some of these offices. I'm trying to get some events going in this ballroom that you meet in. He said, we're just not having any luck. So I'm looking for one permanent tenant. I know you guys love the place. If you want to stay, great. It's $20,000 a month. If not, you got about 2 months left. And we're established at this point. We've launched. Things are going well.
Sure.
And we can't leave. We love it here. We're also not going to pay him $20,000 a month. So I asked.
And again, to move, there aren't a lot of options, and it would mean moving.
It'd be a bit of a
like you'd move communities. Yeah. I mean, you're kind of at the anchor of the front of this community.
What in church plan would feel like maybe moving backwards at least.
Sure.
And some of the progress that we felt like we had a good setup. And so we went back to him and just said, hey, again, are you willing for us to get creative? And he's like, I mean, I guess, just don't forget it's $20,000 a month. I said, okay, pulled some business-minded people together. And even in some of our core team days, we didn't know that it would be the facility looking forward. But we had the conversation that was always, how are we going to be a community-facing church? Like, how are we going to serve our city? How are we going to put a dent in the needs of this city? One of the questions we asked in the early days is, if our church went missing, would this community feel it?
And I think that is such a huge question to ask.
Or is it just another group of people looking for a place to do church on Sunday? And so that was always kind of a driving part of our DNA in our early days. And so then this facility comes up, and it was like, okay, well, this might be that opportunity. And so I put in front of this sort of team of entrepreneurial people, business. We had an insurance person, we had a commercial real estate person, we had an accountant and a banker on this team that I put together.
And these were just folks from the core team, the group that had launched recently. Okay.
And I said, guys, here's the deal. We obviously can't pay that at all. We've been paying $3,000 a month. Talk about a major leap. Here's the idea. And really just kind of, in short, pitch this idea for how this building could be community facing, in full confidence that we could fill it, and that it would be called the Exchange, not City Life Church, but the Exchange. We had to brand it as something that was not a church. This was going to be a space that would serve the city. The church could meet there.
Right.
The church would be a tenant of this operation, just like anybody else. And so we said, hey, we will be built on 3 basic points of sale. One is co-working space. We would start a co-working operation out of the ballroom area where we would flip the space, so we'd still be a set-up, tear-down church, and that would serve so we'd sell co-working memberships for $95 a month.
Yep.
We would lease the offices. We felt like we could do that. We weren't sure why the owner wasn't doing it, but we thought it was going to be pretty easy to do.
Okay, not you guys move into the office, but you could lease them to other
lease
people.
The offices.
Okay.
We would work out of the co-working space.
Yep.
Be present with the people that are in there, host we had to run it.
Sure.
But we would sublease out. We made sure that was a part of the offer, that we would have the right to do that. That we would sublease out about 15 offices, knowing that would be the bread and butter, man. If we could just get people to sign a lease for a year at a time, the church still has the opportunity to pivot if we ever needed to grow into those rooms. But we would just renew them 1 year at a time. But that in terms of maintenance on this operation, like having a lease and that check just comes once a month, that would be our bread and butter. Co-working would be a little more maintenance. There's a little more flow, people in and out the doors, office hours, a lot of kind of logistics. And then the third piece was events. We said, hey, this is going to be a space where the community can use it for events. People in ministry will ask me a lot, like, well, what's the limit? What kind of events the church can and can't do. And people will argue this, and I'm at least I want to say we're consistent in it, even if people disagree. We've said, hey, this is the exchange. The church is a tenant here, and this is meant to serve the city. Yep. And some of those events can be just as missional as what we're doing on Sunday.
Sure.
If it's our people.
So who negotiated, like you pulled that group together from the church plant? Was the church the ones that like owned that signed that lease, or did a group of you form another corporation? Like how did that work when you say like the church becomes the tenant and all that?
It was kind of like under the table low jack business model in the early days. Like I just signed the lease. And, whatever, 501c3 says I'm the president of the organization, whatever we made up back in those days to try to get that. And so we just signed the lease.
Okay.
But let me back up for a second. We present this to the owner and we say, here's what we think we can do. We'll give you $13,000 a month. That's what the team said that we could do. They projected if we were successful, that's what we could do. The church would be a tenant in that, and the church would pay continue paying its $3,000 a month that it had been paying.
Right.
So really it needed to produce $10,000 a month plus enough to cover utilities and some of the other operating expenses. I'll never forget the day I called him up and I said, hey, we'll give you $13,000 a month. And
because he'd been saying 20.
He'd been saying 20. And here's kind of the beauty I want to see, that like when we're planting churches, we have it's not just this entrepreneurial bent that is dependent on, like we have another helper.
That's right.
In this, that's a wildly important part of this whole thing that we're doing. That's not all on us. We got to seek the Lord and plead with him. Like, Lord, would you open these doors? He sits down and he laughs like he thinks it's the funniest thing. And I was like, I'm dead serious. And I'm like red in the face, like from a business standpoint. I'm like, I just said the stupidest thing to this real estate mega billionaire.
Sure. Yeah.
And he just said, he says, do you think you can do that? Can you even do 13,000? Like, I just thought you were going to walk. I said,
yeah.
Oh no, we'll do it. I said, but we can't pay you right away. We need to sign a lease today. And we need to keep paying you $3,000 a month for 6 more months because we need to build out the model. So we need a little bit of a runway. And then when we start paying you, we need to start at $10,000 a month for 3 months, $12,000 a month for 3 months, and then we'll get you to the 13. And then you can put us on an escalator for 15 years moving forward. Right. We wrote all that in.
Yeah.
And he was just dumbfounded, and he just goes, Is there anything else that you want while we're entertaining this offer? I said, and matter of fact, yes, would you throw in 2 golf memberships to your club? And he's like, oh my gosh. And then he sat there like spinning in the chair, and he goes, "You really think you could do it?" I said, "I promise you we can do it." He goes, "Okay, I'll send it to my attorney." And we signed it. And so the work began.
Well, one of the things, Kristen, my wife, and I laughed as we were planting. We used to always say, it just became a theme. Like, you don't have because you don't ask.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what's worse? Like, you don't have a facility now. So what's the worst? He says no.
Yeah,
and
say
walk.
the dumbest
you
thing.
might as well try.
It's better than what you're going to get if you don't.
Right.
So if I fast forward a bit, we filled the space, we did the leases, we built out the co-working operation. We fundraised for that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We started really slow booking events, managing those. People in the church were sort of helping manage, helping clean, open and close, things like that. We got to a place where we could hire somebody to run the exchange.
Yeah.
Run the leasing, run the day-to-day operations, open in the morning, make coffee, close in the night, turn the lights off. So then now we had someone on staff who ran the exchange, and they were essentially on our church staff.
Right.
We were able to pay that way. It wasn't a huge moneymaker. Anytime the exchange made money, we threw more of the church's expenses at it.
Yeah.
So if we needed a new projector, well, the exchange could pay for it. When we went to get a new sound system, the exchange paid for it. City Life Church, to this day, remains a tenant, and our tithes and our budget as a church, we pay $4,000 a month.
Yeah, 8 years in.
That's it. The exchange pays the utilities. We have full control over the building, and we get to serve the community.
Yep.
And that has just been a wild ride. When you say
no,
go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, because I've been in a couple times, and one of the way, when you walk in, it looks like a co-working space.
Yeah.
It's a great space.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of a neutral territory for the community, somebody to walk in and have an office. They don't feel like they're renting an office in the basement of a church or something like that. But talk about like some of the things you did to make setup and tear down easy, like the bookshelves out front. And just some of those creative things that you guys did.
We first had to really help get into our church, our folks' mindset that this is not our space.
Yeah.
And that was a really hard shift because it's like we run, like it is. The church owns the exchange.
Sure.
But the mindset is like it's the community first. The church can get in line when it needs to.
Yep.
And so from that allowed us to be able to help people who wanted to serve in the church through, just setting the place up with understanding like it needs to stay neutral. It can't be a church that people come to. It needs to be the exchange, and then the church gets it on Sunday.
Right.
And for other times that it needs it too.
Yeah.
And so things like you're talking about, like we have a coffee cart that, is kind of like it's coffee during the week, but it's our Connect Center on Sunday. We have bookshelves that we had a buddy make who
I thought this was the coolest thing.
On one side, it's our resource center, but then you can turn them around and it's sort of this neutral, like decorations from Hobby Lobby. You walk into like an office building. When you walk into the ballroom, there's no signage that says City Life Church. There's no imagery. It looks like an executive business center. The sign out front, when we put the monument sign out, it doesn't say City Life Church. It says the exchange, and it says City Life Church as a tenant of the exchange.
Yeah.
Those were some of the important pieces if it was going to be sustainable as a space that served the community and not just a church that was trying to pay its bills.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that even that center space, you call it the ballroom, like it's got a big fireplace on it, and you've got, I can't remember if there's like one or two big screen TVs or a projector or something up above it. And so, during the week, it looks super comfortable and inviting and warm. And,
we got a fireplace. Our projection screen comes down from there. We would set up and we built out our screen frame for our projection screen to come off the wall for events because they didn't want it hanging over the mantle because it's this big, beautiful mantle. Well, we finally got the exchange to pay for a motorized retractable screen.
Nice. Love it. I love it.
Things like that.
Well, you've mentioned this a few times that it was there to serve the community and serve the city. And, you just in the back of my head, I just keep hearing like, seek the welfare of the city.
That's right.
Seek the welfare of the city.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it served City Life from a functional, like, okay, now we have a spot we can gather and meet. And that's important. Yeah. And I want to talk about like the development of that and the expansion of that. But talk about the missional side of it and why that was really the driver here. And what that's been like the good, the hard.
We started thinking differently when two of our tenants got saved, just through conversations that we were having with them, and started coming to our church. We started discipling them.
Love that.
We're like, wait a second. This isn't just a planting strategy. This is a missional strategy and impact. And so really kind of started to go, and what is happening here? Like, I don't want to miss something here if you're just trying to find a facility. And really started to dig in more and try to kind of construct a model of what was happening that we were seeing. And then kind of go, man, where does this fit into church planting? This feels really reproducible. It really feels like with where culture is going, with where finance is going, and with some of the data of the average church member giving 2.38% of their income in tithe, if they do, the ones that do, I mean, it's going to get really hard to pay for our places and our people. And so how do we really kind of package this and go, hey, there's more going on here than just church planning strategy.
Yeah.
There's something going on here for, well, you said Jeremiah 29:7, seek the welfare of the city, and in it you will find your welfare. Like, this goes back to the early days. We named it City Life Church. We wanted to be in all of the life of the city and to see our city become a gospel-centered place. And so I had a mentor that I was meeting with, really trying to flesh some of these things out. And this person was really involved in studying the idea of kind of that third space, how are churches using space that are community facing. And we just got in this conversation about how, three books later in Daniel, we really see sort of that model of the tension between God's people and then sort of the city, and whether it was in ruin or whether it was the governing authorities or rulers. And there were really kind of these three circles, that model, that chart of sort of the three concentric circles, and we could really put three different things in those circles. The first one would be, and when you think seeking the welfare of the city, or some translations say seek the peace and the prosperity of the city. So we ran with that idea of peace, that there would be a partnering piece. The partnering piece would be sort of that cultural piece where when we're partnering with our culture, this is work and relationship.
Sure.
So now for us, that partnering piece would be the exchange. This would be, hey, we're going to partner with our community in work and relationship and to allow so that can bring that kind of peace to the city. Like if you go to Daniel, you see like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they get out of the fire, Nebuchadnezzar's head is spinning, and he puts them in a position to partner with him. We see Daniel and those guys partner with the wise men and sort of and what would happen in exile. Right. The other piece that we see is this preservation piece, to preserve the peace and the prosperity of the city. This was the social partnership, really. So you got your partnering piece, your preservation piece is, how do we serve the needs of the city? How can we be salt and light in our city? And that's that preservation piece. What happened along the way was we had an opportunity to take another piece of property that's near the main building that we've been talking about, and we called the owner of that building and said, will you buy that and lease it back to us, because we want to put something in there that is a need that we've identified in the city. We've identified that there's a need to resource foster families, and even some women and men in crisis pregnancy situations, to provide a resource closet that gives a lot of dignity to walk through and doesn't feel like I'm just poor shopping.
We were just in that. You saying closet though is a way undersell on this thing. We were it's right next door. Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, it looks like a children's boutique or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
we wanted
it's
it to
really,
be, there's no price tags on anything. It's all free, but people walk in and they go, how much for these shoes?
Yeah.
And we're like, no, you don't understand. Like, they're like, this is surely a store. This is a store. It's not a store. It's to serve you.
Yeah.
But that really emerged out of that circle. That there would be a preservation piece that we're pursuing, to be in the social construct of our city, the salt and light part of our city. But you also see that with Daniel, like he gets into, and what were some of the needs? Nebuchadnezzar's throwing some crazy things out there, and he's like, but this is the need.
So talk a little bit about that. Talk about the partnering with families that are fostering and how all that came about.
Yeah.
Like
we kind of put it out there. How can we serve our city? And we want to have partnerships with people in the city that we feel like we can put that idea again, that we can put a dent in that. I forgot who wrote it, but there was a book forever ago that I read, The Church of Irresistible Influence. And it was all about, and they asked that question: if your church ceased to exist today, would your community feel it? And so we're saying, like, who are we to the needs of our city besides a gathering on Sunday? And that led to a partnership with this organization called Lifeline, where they are a Christian foster and adopt agency. They're really all over the Southeast, but strong presence in South Carolina, and their main South Carolina office is in Mount Pleasant. So they brought that need to us and said, hey, this is a need that we have in the city. Since then, the pregnancy center has come, and since then, other scenarios have people just walked in and said, we need help, and we go, that's what it's for.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even that is really important as you're planting a church, to not just roll in and be like, hey, we have all the answers for the community. I mean, but to position yourself and ask, so what do you need? Like, and to listen to that, and to see where God is at work. And so God is at work among these families and in this organization, given a life alternative to things like abortion and other things like that. And then you guys going, well, we could answer that.
Yeah.
Like, we sit right in the middle of this community. So when a family gets a foster child in the middle of the night and they have to go to school, we can answer that need.
And when we're asking the question, there were a lot of things that were overwhelming. We're like, I don't know that we can do that.
Right.
But we keep asking the question, and you respond to the one that you can do.
Right.
And that seemed very tangible for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
The third circle is the proclamation piece. This is the church's, or just the organization as a whole. This is the church's spiritual presence. So this is our church. This is our proclamation piece, is gospel and truth in our city. And so when it comes to and you see that with Daniel, like he refused to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's gods. In fact, went up to his room, opened the window, and proclaimed. Right. Yeah. And so you have that sort of consistency in those three circles. Like, even in that story and some of those elements in Daniel, after we see in exile, seek the welfare of the city to which I've sent you. Right. And so there's got to be this bigger picture that we see than just building a Sunday service. So now when we hold those three circles up together, and we've got our partnering piece, the exchange, our preservation piece, the haven, and our proclamation piece, the church, we say that's what we're planting. So when we're looking to another part of our city to plant in, we're not just planting a Sunday gathering, we're planting something that is very much for the welfare of our city. They all go together. So now when we're looking for space, we have a space we have a very missional piece that is actually going to help fund that space.
Right.
And in that space, we're going to serve the community, and then from that, we're going to proclaim the gospel.
Yeah.
So to tie all that together, then we kind of started to act our age a little bit, and felt like we need to organize this a little more professionally and legitimately than. So the way that works is with all three of these pieces. City Life is so now I'm getting like super ground level,
Let's
like kind
of
geeky,
important
things.
Yeah, you got to figure it out.
Things you got to figure out. City Life has always been the 501c3. We got with an attorney, and what we did was we detached the exchange and made it a for-profit business that is owned by the nonprofit church.
Okay.
And so the reason for that is if it's its own business and not connected, somebody's name has to be on it.
Right.
But this allows our elders to even govern the direction that we go with the exchange.
Yep.
It allows it even to receive some nonprofit benefits. Now, without getting into what those are, there's some things now that the exchange does that we are liable to pay taxes on, so unrelated business income tax. And there's some things that the exchange does for income that benefit the church in its nonprofit mission, and so we still don't have to pay full tax.
Right.
And so it's really clean. It is a recognized business in our community. It's owned by a nonprofit. Nobody really knows that part.
Sure.
And then the Haven gets to become its own 501c3, also owned by the church. So it all stays under the name of City Life Church. It's all governed by our governing parameters. And as a separate nonprofit that doesn't have the church status tagged onto it, it makes the Haven and its mission eligible for grant money. And so now we can fundraise for the Haven and its operation differently than we can fundraise for the church and its operation.
Right.
And so all of those then are kind of how we've structured all of that to be able to then kind of legally,
right,
and just very practically move all of that forward.
Sure. And I mean, I just keep thinking like, wise as a serpent, innocent as a dove. Like, you're using these structures that are out there to take advantage of shielding liability and fundraising, like you said, and getting grants and all this, and never having to budge on the gospel mission that Jesus has called you to do. And so you get to do both of those hand in hand with each other through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just my hope that planters think outside my box. I honestly think it won't be an option here in a little while.
I completely agree.
And I just, it wouldn't be for us in this community. We're 8 years in now. And without that, honestly, I'm not saying we wouldn't be somewhere. I just literally don't have a picture of where it would be in our community.
Yep.
And so again,
and you couldn't have dreamt it. Like, you weren't thinking, if you go all the way back to Franklin before you move here, hey, you know what we want to do is start a for-profit business and start a nonprofit to help with it. You know what I mean? God has been writing that story along the way for you and unfolding it to you along the way there.
And to put it into perspective in terms of what we're talking about, I'll go ahead and share it. Like to run the exchange is a $500,000 a year operation. And so it's responsible for producing $500,000 a year. But remember, that is why the church only pays $4,000 a month and not $500,000 a year, because the exchange pays that bill. The church isn't paying utilities. The church isn't paying internet.
And it's allowed you guys as a church to redeploy some of those assets other places. Like, you can be involved in church planning that you guys are in, and mission work in Costa Rica, and you can hire staff. You've been able to do other facility here on the property for kids ministry and weekday space and things like that. So,
and it's why a lot of us, we want to own our space in a lot of regards. Is not that it saves us month to month, but we look down the road and we go, at one point we'll own this, and all of that goes back into the mission.
Right.
We're in an era where investors don't like selling. So we've tried to buy our facilities for years. And he just says, nope, you're one of the best tenants we have. Why would we sell it?
Sure.
So we may never own. And so even then, though, that takes the edge off of going, we're paying a fortune and owning nothing. All of our money now still gets to go back into the mission.
That's right. That's right. And so I think this is just so creative. I do think there are all kinds of lessons to just be taken from you guys. Like, I've told you this before, you should write the PDF on the thing and produce it and get it out there for guys to be able to, to use and put in their own context. But you mentioned this, you guys, you have a vision for planting around Charleston and the greater city. And so how does this play into that strategy?
Yeah. I mean, those other neighborhoods don't just need another Sunday congregation. They need the Haven.
Right.
They need the exchange. The exchange might happen in context. So think about it this way. For us in Mount Pleasant, that is co-working offices and events. But that exchange is contextual to that neighborhood. It might be something that aims towards education in a different part of our city. It might be something that aims towards heavier on the social side. Maybe something that aims more towards the cultural side and the arts. And maybe there's a center for arts and coffee and community.
Yeah, so it's not
co-working
because co-working. It's co-working worked because you're in a place where a bunch of people work from home and do remote work, and they don't have office buildings. But
when we plant in North Charleston, it might have a more artistic, community-centered bent to it.
Yep.
And then the social side of the Haven is actually, and that's in a community where that's even more needed than where we're even at in Mount Pleasant, and it's still needed.
Yep.
So, but that is, in so many ways, when we're looking for facilities, we're looking, and we didn't talk about it, but there's a school now that's renting space from us, a Christian school. My kids go to the school. It's an amazing school. But they're going, hey, well, when you plant, we want to multiply and go into those neighborhoods too. So let's do that together. And so now it's like, oh my gosh, but that impacts how we shop. So I think that's important to kind of go, it doesn't work anywhere. We happen to be in a facility that accomplishes that goal, that is community facing. Remember, we want our churches to be community facing, but they're not always designed to be community facing. They're designed to be inward facing to serve just the people in that church. And so I think it's important to think about this, especially for church planners that are just getting going and are shopping for space, is now be intentional with the kind of space that you're looking for. If we were offered a church with a steeple and a dying congregation, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love that model. I think the replant thing is a whole nother conversation that's critical and necessary in church planning right now. But in terms of what I'm saying, what we're looking for, that might not help us accomplish our mission.
Right.
And so we're looking for a place that is neutral, that accomplishes all of these things, where the church gets to fulfill its mission, but not with its back to the city.
Right. And it also allows you to look at some things that you might not otherwise be able to look at.
Yeah.
Like, you might not otherwise be able to go to North Charleston or some of these places if you didn't have this model to work from. Because it allows you to move into some spaces that you might otherwise just be back in the same place and go, we couldn't afford to be there, or we don't know how we would make inroads into this community if we were there.
Right.
And so
I've joked, I don't know if it's blasphemous. If somebody gave us a building with a steeple on it, we'd probably take it, pull the steeple down, and make it, look a little more community facing.
Sure.
Respectfully. But
yeah. Well, Aaron, thanks for sitting down.
Yeah.
I love hearing your story and seeing what God is doing. And I think you all are such a great example of following the Spirit of the Lord, letting Him lead, letting Him move, letting Him work, and you guys drafting off of that and being discerning and going, all right, what do we have? What is God providing for us? And then how do we leverage this for the sake of the gospel in this community? And so I love that you guys are doing that.
It hasn't come without its challenges, but I wouldn't go back and change a day of it.
I know. And for church planners that are listening to this, can they contact you guys?
Absolutely.
Or,
I haven't got to it yet, but I'd love to build that PDF. I'd love to help other guys think through their spaces or their community structures, and even just their business model, in terms of how we structure all of that and do good ministry and
cool.
business.
What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
Yeah, you just email me, Aaron at citylifecharleston.com.
All right.
And let's set something up. I'd love to have a conversation.
That'd be great. Hey, thanks for sitting down, talking about this.
Thanks for having me.
I think the impact will be huge, and
I hope it is.
Way to go.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yep.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Acts 29 podcast. If you want to connect with Acts 29 or find out more about planting a church with Acts 29, you can go to Acts 29